like war, but I wouldn't say I love it.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple, a show where I rant and rave about board games, just not necessarily in equal measure. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first my sponsor would like a quick word with you. As gamers, we find it hard to deal with empty shelves, some worse than others. You therefore want a supplier that has what you need at affordable prices and delivers on time. For me, that supplier is Kiender. They offer a discount on bulk purchases as well as a point scheme for future acquisitions down the line. If there's a hot title you're after, chances are Kiender's got it. Wingspan? Mine. Arc Nova? Mine. Eclipse? Actually I hate that game, it's terrible, but you might like it. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to Kiender and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
Got an interesting one today. This is Peacemakers, The Horrors of War. Yeah, a bit of a dark title, but yet it's got cutesy animals over it, which is interesting when it comes to setting the tone for this game. This is a re-implementation of an old game by Snowdell Designs called Dawn of the Peacemakers, I think it was called, and I never got a chance to play that one. I heard of it, Mike DeLicio talked highly of it, and some others talked, slightly lesser of it, but I was interested in the concept. The idea that you were trying to stop two wars, like two factions fighting in a war, and you weren't actually participating in the war itself, which is different, because typically it's one faction versus another in bloodthirsty conflict. And Snowdell Designs, if you're not familiar, I have already done some reviews on their products. In fact, they're in here with my accolades, which I'm actually quite pleased to see. Lands of Galzier and Dale of Merchants. Now, I can't recall if I've done a video review on Dale of Merchants, but I know that I've talked about it a lot in my top 100. And Lands of Galzier I reviewed, I believe last year, or was it year before, I forget. But, by all means, check out those videos and see what you can find. But this one I was definitely keen to see, because so far, Snowdell Design has made, those two main games, and I've really enjoyed those. So I'm hoping that this will more essentially be like a free-for-free affair, where I like this one as well. But the concept may be fantastic. The idea that it's a co-op may sing to me as well, because obviously I do like co-op games. But mechanically, has this re-implementation, well, I can't say fixed the original because I never played it, but is this now the version that I can recommend to others, and will it be one that sits on my shelf? Let's find out.
Hooray! People are paying attention to me!
So Peacemakers is a game of 6 scenarios in the box, where you have these 2 flip charts that are opened out to the particular scenario. It's split in half to condense board game space in the box, basically, otherwise you'd need this massive booklet. But the idea is that you lay it out to the scenario that you want, and it will have details of the map, as well as the 2 factions that are fighting. In scenario 1's case, you have the macaws, or the parrots as I'm going to call them, versus the ocelots, which I don't know why they don't just say cats, but I'm not an animal expert. But let's just say parrots versus cats in this instance, alright? It's a bit easier on the pronunciation. But each one will have its own setup and rule instructions. So for example, these cats will start out here in a little fortress area, and the parrots are marching on from this way, and there'll be different units. So you have a leader perhaps, you have a ranged, melee, that kind of thing, but kept fairly simple. And you and your fellow players will take care of these little peacemaker pieces, which start off in the center between all the conflict, but can move around the map and essentially, they basically do things with the various armies when they move nearby them.
Now we're meeting new people!
And what players have are these resource cards. They will be dealt 4 every round. So they get new cards as the game progresses, but you can hang on to cards from round to round. And these have various abilities on them. So they allow you to do one of 4 particular actions, or to use for the actual card effect. So, for instance, you have Survey, so you can look at what the 2 factions are likely to do for the round. You can move across the map, you can build fortifications to add defense, or you can delegate them to other players, because each player has a unique character, and some of these cards work better on certain characters. So instead of playing the card yourself, if you share a space with a friendly player, you can delegate the card, give it to them, and then they can play it for a boosted effect. So there's an aspect of the cooperation. Obviously, if you're playing this solo, then if you're just playing with one character, that whole ability is null and void, but we'll get onto that a bit more later. And then the scenario itself is made up of a bunch of these order cards. Now, these order cards are split in 2 halves for each faction. So you have a left side and a right hand side. So for example, I've got the parrots one here. So here's your right side, here's your left side, get it right. And these will be two separate shuffled decks. And at the end of the round, after you've done as many actions as you want to do, you flip over the top of each, assuming they're not already flipped over by your various actions, like survey, as I said, and you resolve the orders from left to right, with some exceptions as explained. And what they have is they have an initiative value to say which faction acts first, and then they'll do things like they'll charge forward, they'll attack, they'll bolster their defenses, they might all sorts might happen. And you might think, okay, so what's the object? How do we actually get them to stop fighting? Well, each one has a motivation track, which is tracked on the flip charts here. And essentially, as the game goes on, units might die off, certain actions might take place from these orders, but based on what you do to mitigate things, these factions are going to slowly demotivate over time, hopefully. And what you're trying to do is get both of the sides' motivations to line up in these little green sections here. If you do that, then they basically say, you know what, I'm sick and tired of this war. We've lost so much, this isn't worth it. Let's negotiate status quo peace and we'll go our separate ways.
The spirit is willing, but the flesh is spongy and bruised.
If one side goes to the black flag, then they surrender, the war is won by the other faction, and you didn't keep the peace, at which point all the players lose. That's the only way you win or lose. There's no other way to do so in this game. Now, with your actions, you're essentially, trying to sort of weaken certain sides or bolster the defenses of certain sides, depending on which side is motivated and demotivated. You might have a situation where the cats are winning the war and they're really yeah, we're going to crush them, we're going to crush the parrots, and the parrots are really low. So suddenly you've got to get on the parrot side and, bolster their defenses and weaken the cats somehow. But you have to also be careful because units can die in this. Yes, like I say, cutesy animals with a weird tone, but don't worry, it's not bloody and gory. But, maybe we'll just say they're unconscious. How about that? But essentially, when one of them gets taken out, you have these horror cards which get added to your resource deck. You draw them pretty much instantly after you get them, and these can affect different players, and they basically install bad effects on you. So, obviously, the horrors of war takes its toll on the players if they let too many units die. But sometimes you kind of have to. You can't save everybody. That's the way war is. And play basically continues on and on with you repeating actions with these cards until you reach one of those conditions. Either you win or you lose, and the scenario will throw in little tweaks with the setup, like units being easier to defend in certain areas. One scenario has a separate faction, which is a pirate ship that comes in and starts cannonballing foes. So they've all got their little differences here and there, but basically carry on until one of those conditions is met, win or lose. Let's talk aesthetics first. Well, Snowdale Design is no stranger to good aesthetics. Dale of Merchants, those cards look great. The artwork, beautiful, nice and colourful. Lands of Galzir, also beautiful. Everything about that game looks nice. And this one, again, no surprise here, it looks great. This map is very colourful. It's, these are big, so you can easily see and read what's going on. The cards are good quality. All the miniatures are screen printed with these little rubber bases with different shape holes. So even though the Meeple has the same base, it goes into a shape, like a base of a different shape, like circle or star, and these apply to at different times with the orders. So this is a really neat way of differentiating units on the field without having to change the actual wooden piece itself. It's a really neat idea. And, they're nice, rubbery and bendy. I really like these. These are good quality. But what I really love with the aesthetics is, firstly, the way these flip charts work, because if you tried to combine this together into one massive book, it'd be a bit unwieldy and you'd probably have to expand the size of the box. Well, here, having it in two halves just makes it that little bit easier to transport around, and it's not fiddly to deal with. I mean, things will still line up, and it's not like you've got to worry about nudging it or anything. It's a really neat system, and everything that you need for a scenario, for the most part, is explained on these flip charts itself, with only a tiny bit of information required in the rulebook. But the best thing of this, I gotta say, publishers start taking note. The insert is fantastic here. This insert will hold everything in place where you need it fully sleeved. All the cards are on there, all the meeples have their own little holes, even the bases, the cubes and that, and all the different factions. Now, That alone, you might be thinking, well, is that a big deal? We kind of expect it.
Oh, my dear doctor, you have been naive.
Hey, we expect it. It doesn't mean it always happens, right? But with this welcome letter that you get, that shows where everything goes. Again, great that this publisher does this. But what I especially like is you might have noticed on the side of the box here, these little banners. And if you're really eagle-eyed, you might have even noticed there's a few up here as well, which are repeated if I turn the box around on this side and along here. These are telling you what goes in each part of the tray using the box as a guide. Not the outside of the box, well, not like the outside full size of a massive, let's say, Voidfall or, you know, something from Minecraft where those giant boxes there. But even the welcome letter has a similar thing. I love this mechanism for telling me what's in the box because not only do they put it on the outside of the box, but they put it on the inside. So if I look at it from this way, no matter which way I'm looking at it, front or back, I can see clearly where things go. So I look at the front here and it's like, right, that's the resource deck, that's scenario 4, scenario 2, horror deck, great. But then I look on the other side and I can see, right, there's the spectacled bears, there's the green iguanas, the poison frogs, the scarlet parrots as I call them, you know, everything is just nicely laid out, which gives the impression that the publisher cared about, you know, ease of use, you know, practicalities. They cared about these things that a lot of publishers these days just aren't factoring in. So many times I see poorly designed inserts or, you know, dodgy reference aids or things where stuff could have been improved, and I cannot fault anything about the way that this is laid out. It's just being done with care. And given that this was a Kickstarter project as well, again, it's nice to actually see a Kickstarter that that doesn't miss out key things at the expense of trying to meet like a stretch goal criteria.
It is just that the luxury edition has so much more eagle.
The rules, very straightforward. This is your rulebook and that is it. And even then, a lot of this is explaining each scenario. So you've got a page for each scenario and a page for setup like flavor text. If you want to read the flavor text, that's all well and good. But, you know, all this like last half of the book is entirely just scenarios. All of that chunk there. You've got a really good iconography and round overview on the back with like a reference card, yes, but I think that this rulebook is small enough that it's not intrusive on the table. But the rules are basically this. That's it. That's all the rules. Not a lot there. I mean, game overview, you can read that with a components list. Then you've got the setup, easy on 2 pages. I mean, the setup for this, well, we'll get onto that in a minute. But, you know, the adventurer phase, there you go. There's 2 pages for you. And then the army phase, and there's 2 pages for you, all with pictorial examples, all with clear instruction. You shouldn't have an FAQ moment. This game is really, really simple to teach and get out, which is such a good, refreshing change. I mentioned quick setup. The setup for this is like non-existent. I mean, you get the flip charts and put them on the 2 pages. This tells you pretty much everything you need to know, bar 1 or 2 special rules which you'll get from the scenario page in here. You know, the units, what units are in the game, tells you right here. What bases are they all on? Tells you exactly what they are underneath the portrait, right? B, C, D, C and D are circles, B is a star, right? All you got to do is just get the pieces out, put them on their bases and on the map, and it will tell you exactly where they are put and what orientation they are, because where they're facing is important for line of sight and stuff. So it's all really, really simple. I can get this game out in no time at all, mere minutes. And even takedown doesn't take that long, because you just basically pop the cards back in the insert, pop the minis back in here, put the bases where they are, the cubes and that, and then close the flip pad, stick them in, done. And the game's packed away. Quick and easy. Oh my word, is it so refreshing to see something like this.
I admire its purity.
Okay, so it's quick to get out, nice and easy, and all that. The question is it fun to play? I think so far it has been very fun to play, and it's definitely going to give you a different experience depending on how many players you play it with. If you play this solo, you can essentially play multi-handed, or you can play with just one character. It's entirely up to you. And I say multi-handed, I don't mean that you need to have multiple hands of cards, but what happens is in a game, normally you have 1 card per player, effectively, if it was 4 players. Because you get 4 cards at the end of every round, so that's essentially 1 each. But you can dictate who gets more or less, depending on whether they've saved cards up from previous rounds. But in a solo game, you would take all 4 cards for yourself. And if you're only controlling 1 single piece, you would not have anybody to delegate to. So the delegate ability is entirely null and void. So you've only got to concentrate on the card effect and the other 3 actions. But when solo, you have all the cards to do, and you can think of cool combos to utilize these. I've enjoyed true solo games of this, thinking like, I wanted to test if that would work. But I've also tried playing with all 4 characters, of which then I just simply put the cards out in front of me based on which character has what, and then the delegate ability comes back in, but then I have the extra puzzle of, if I can give that card to you, then you can do this, well, maybe I should give that to you. I'll play this, right, we'll play this one, and, it's a good little puzzle to solve. Now, is the game harder or easier when you do it either way? Hard to tell, really, because if you try to play with multiple characters, you can cover more ground on the map, but then you've got to worry about delegating cards. If I play with just one single piece, I can do whatever I like with the cards, and I don't have to worry about delegating ever, but then I'm just by myself. So if I spend my time with the cat army, for example, if I now want to do something with the parrot army, I need to get over there quick. So there is a kind of, there's a little balancing there's a balancing effect with regards to playing true solo versus multiplayer or multi-handed, and I think both ways work. I expected one version to be absolute rubbish, but no, I will gladly play in either way. Now, playing as multiplayer, you have less cards to yourself, but you are discussing with other players. It's a co-op, it's a full discussion type game, so, hopefully, you have to kind of avoid the alpha gamer to some extent, but saying that, because you don't necessarily know what orders are coming off these decks, you won't necessarily be able to alpha game because you won't have all the information to hand. Now, this is something that you have to expect in all co-ops. It's why some people don't even play co-ops, because they hate that aspect, and I hate that aspect as well. But I haven't come across a situation in my play so far with multiplayer where that has been a particular issue here. Usually everybody's involved, and yes, you might not have that many cards to play yourself, like from your own hand, but it's a bit like playing Pandemic. If you play Pandemic, you only have so many cards in front of you, and they're all essentially the same type of cards, but you don't play with secret hands in Pandemic, or at least I never do, so everybody can see what's going on, and so you discuss as a group the best way to utilize each player in the game. This is a similar thing. You can see what cards everybody has got, and the rules don't specify that they're hidden hands, so maybe you could play with hidden hands, but I don't know, that doesn't seem right, really. You're trying to cooperate, and the game's not the easiest game in the world, so how about give yourself a bit of a break. But I like the idea that we can see what the abilities are and people can discuss. Maybe we should go and help the cats this round. Yeah, but the thing is, we know that the parrots are going to attack. Do we want them to attack? Because then they're going to absolutely annihilate those 2 cats. And the puzzle is good fun to solve. Now, when you play the scenario for the first time, you're not going to understand how these particular decks work, because each faction behaves in a certain way. Like the parrots like to be very quick off the mark, they're motivated that they can go first, but they tend to strike quite often. Bears, for example, if they get damaged, they get harder. They don't like to take cover, they like to be in the thick of it, so they're a bit demotivated if they have to take cover and hide. There's little aspects like that. When you first play a scenario, you won't know how the people behave. So you have to spend a little bit of time getting to know the decks, and that's an interesting puzzle to solve in itself. But even once you figure it out, and if you were to play the scenario again and already have this information, the cards will come out at different times. You'll have different resource cards available to you, and whether you're playing with just one character or all 4 of them, will have an effect as well. You can even tweak the scenario difficulty using the descriptions back here, where it allows you to play at a harder difficulty if you believe it then gets too easy. But the puzzle is a simple one. It's not like complicated. You can see what sort of things are going on. There are multiple ways that you can go. Certainly how much information you've surveyed or not surveyed is going to impact your decision making. Sometimes you have to gamble. You might have a turn where you do no surveying whatsoever. You're like, look, we bolstered some defenses. We need the cards. Let's hang on to these. We can't really do much by surveying one card. We just need to let things play out. And then next round we'll have a bumper turn, check what's going on and do what we can. You get to have these kind of turns where you pick your battles, you decide whether to play it safe, go for a gamble, focus on one army, try and split your, diversify to both, and when you do it, and it just makes for a very good, simple puzzle, but where everybody's involved and having a good time. Replay value may come into question at some point here because there are 6 scenarios in the game, and these are, I've not played all 6 scenarios, okay? I've had to repeat the first scenario a few times, but I have played the first 4 scenarios in here, so I've not played 5 and 6. They look pretty cool though. The 5 and 6 one use the poison frogs, which are like a horde, a horde of little people. That sounds really cool. But the first 4 I've played, and it has been very good fun with all scenarios. They each have their own little quirks, different ways of playing, different little rules, just to keep them fresh and good. Now, obviously, as I said, you play it for the first time, you then figure out how the decks work, and so subsequent plays, you know what they are. But the order of the cards does mean that the scenarios are going to play differently with different players and different cards and different number of players. But you have to bear in mind that there are only 6 scenarios in the box. So you may think, well, maybe I can play this 2 to 3 times per scenario and then I'm kind of done. You'll still get your money's worth by doing that, but I still think you could play them multiple times to, get a good feeling, especially if you're going to play it with new people. But bear in mind, that won't be the end of this game because the difficulty rating goes up to 5. The scenarios in here, though, only go up to difficulty 3. Yeah, nothing in here is difficulty 4 or 5, which means they're planning to release more content. Now, whether that will come as a full box expansion or online DLC or whatever, I don't know. But clearly, they have plans for it.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
Variety could be called into question here as well. The resource cards is not a big deck, and in fact the horror deck I think is actually bigger than the resource deck, although that is because there's a mini expansion that came with the game that basically bolstered this deck, which is all well and good, but I would have rather the mini expansion bolstered this deck, frankly, because I want more resource cards, not a ton of horror cards, even though the horror cards are pretty cool. We'll get onto those in a minute. But yeah, with a lot of duplicates in here and not that much differentiation in terms of like all the abilities to do with the lizard, the gecko, are similar to each other, whereas like the abilities to do with the bird are similar to each other. Each one has their own quirks. Like one is particularly good at retreating and defense, another one is very good at manipulating decks. Although I must admit, the one that's good at manipulating decks is a pretty tricky one to use right, because there are times, you have to do some very crafty stuff with these decks to make good use of the bird's powers. So, just a slight warning there. But yeah, I would have liked that just to be a little bit more variety in here, because you're going to see every single ability that's in the game in a game of this. No question. You'll probably go through the entire deck of resource cards before you finish a game, and so you will see everything. And it may start to get a little bit rinse-repeat in that fashion. I would have definitely liked to see more. If you're going to do an expansion with more scenarios, you really, I think, do need to bolster this deck up. I think that's going to be very important. Now, this isn't so much a negative, but maybe just a warning. I mentioned the tone of this game a few times, and yes, it's cutesy animals. If you've seen the Dale of Merchants artwork, you know how cutesy this all looks, and it's like, oh, we got little parrots and cats and little dogs and lizards and froggies. It's all really nice. But it is really trying to get across that this is the horrors of war as well. The 2 factions are fighting for a kickoff, and it's not like they're fighting with, rubber mallets and stuff. They are fighting with swords and bows and things that can actually kill people. They are at war for a reason, and it doesn't shy away from the fact that, the units that are in battle here do die.
And death.
I joked earlier about the fact that we'll say that they're unconscious, but no, they actually do die. They have skulls for the places where you put the unit after it's been killed, and it also gives you the horror cards when they die, so it's not shying away from the fact that this is talking about 2 factions at war here, even if that tone does slightly contrast with the fact that it's all cutesy animals. Even the horror cards themselves, with this mini expansion, you've got quite a lot of different ones here, and I think they're all unique, which is quite cool, but, these pictures are quite disturbing at times, actually. Some of them are quite funny, but you've got I'll go here, self-doubt, drained inspiration, hallucinations, breakdown, flame of destruction, what have we got there? Frightened flight, vertigo, choking scenery, panic attack, paranoia, tunnel vision, twitchy, despair, perplexed, mental block, dose of madness. These do inflict some fairly nasty effects on you, and you're getting into this knowledge that not only are these 2 units fighting and they're dying, but your actual peacekeepers are suffering mental breakdowns effectively by seeing the horrors of war play out. The title's pretty apt on this one. Probably the first time the tagline actually makes sense. Now, that's not to say that this should give you trigger warnings or anything like that. I think the game is still, still cutesy to a point and still not to be taken too seriously. But this is what the theme of the game is, and, as much as it is played up for, a lightness in some respect because it is cutesy animals, just bear in mind it's not like, people do actually die in this. If you're losing units on each side, they do die. They don't magically come back at the end. Peacemakers feels like another solid entry in the lineup for Snowdale design and this IP, while still feeling very different from the others. Dale of Merchants is a deck builder, Lands of Galzier is an open box sandbox adventure game, this is a co-op game. All three feel very different, but all three fit within this IP and aesthetics. The aesthetics, as I said, are gorgeous, well made, well produced, looks beautiful, with an insert that other publishers need to take note on using for their own designs. Add to that the fact that the rules are dead simple with clear instructions. The setup time and takedown time is pretty much non-existent, with useful graphic design all over the place, not that many FAQ moments. This has so much to talk about in a good way. The flaws that I have mentioned are still a concern, but some of those are more concerns for the future. The replay value and the variety in the cards is a bit of a negative, but I've had great fun with the scenarios that I've played, even when I've repeated some of them, and I've still got 2 more that I've not tried at all in the book. You will still get your money's worth from this game, but of course it's definitely up to the publisher to, in the future, preferably not too far distant future, to introduce more scenarios, both easy and hard difficulties. We don't just need a bunch of impossible difficulty scenarios, we do want some easy ones as well, to add a bit of variety so we're not just playing this tutorial scenario all the time. I mean, I say tutorial, it has more instructions, but still, it's the easiest of them, but it's not really a tutorial, if that makes sense. But, that sort of thing is certainly to be bared in mind. It's not the shortest game in the world. I do wish that maybe the whole thing could be wrapped up in 60 to 90 minutes, even with 4 players, but, that's a blemish as well, but not a major blemish. But everything about this is still good fun. I like the puzzle. I like the fact that factions behave differently. Each scenario has felt different with its own little, unique rules. You can tweak them with other little twists in the scenario booklet if you want to make the game harder. But this is one that I can pull out solo and enjoy multiplayer. I've enjoyed 3 and 4 player games of this, but I've also enjoyed just getting it out myself, whipping out a scenario, deciding whether I want to use one or multiple characters. I mean, even playing true solo I find quite fun, just to have free reign of all the cards and to utilize their abilities, particularly as you've only got one character. You're only using the boosted effects for one character. Again, there's this really cool sort of balancing effect as to whether it's easier or harder to play with less characters or more characters. I certainly haven't noticed in particular one being much harder than the other. So this is a really good, solid start. It can only get better from here with more scenarios and hopefully more resource cards to, improve, well, not improve, to add to the variety issue, which is definitely worth mentioning. But I think it's just another solid game. I've had great fun with this. It's one I'm going to keep. I look forward to more content. I'm giving this one a lowish. I think it's a lowish. I did debate between these two, but I think there's enough good stuff in here to put this one in 9 out of 10. I'm giving this one a 9, and you might think, oh, well, you gave the other 2s like 9s and 10s, that's kind of fitting. What can I say? They're producing good stuff, okay? They don't put out a lot of games, but what games they put out have been really solid. This is another solid one. I never played the original Dawn of the Peacemakers. I'd be interested to try it just to see how things have changed, but honestly, this clearly feels like it's going to be the better of the 2, so why do I really need to? If you own the original and you want an improved version, maybe this is one worth checking out, but you're the only ones who can really make that decision because I've not got experience with the original. But if you've been intrigued by this theme, if you've not had a chance to try the original like me, then I definitely recommend jumping into this one if you want a co-op game that's thematic, very beautiful, and can be played both solo and with multiplayer and still have a good equal amount of fun with them. If you don't like co-ops, if you don't like the full discussion type co-ops, then by all means avoid this because it's not going to be for you. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then thumb it up on YouTube, thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the site, and of course share it out on social media when you can. Gaining awareness of the channel is paramount to me right now, and of course if you're able to share it out on social media, more people will see it, more people will watch it hopefully, and then more people can come to the show. By all means, check out the other video links in the description and that appear on top of this video, where I've put links up to various videos I've done, including the Lands of Galzir review, and if I can find it, the Dale of Merchants either review or top 100 segment where I talk about it in particular. And of course, don't forget to check out my Patreon, because this is a self-funding channel. You know, I do this alongside my day job. You know, it takes up my spare time. If it wasn't for the patrons helping to keep this channel funded and the publishers helping out with some review copies, this channel wouldn't be able to operate. So I thank you greatly from the bottom of my heart. You help keep this channel running. So until next time, remember, regardless if you want to say whether these creatures, these itty bitty little beautiful creatures, are dead or unconscious, it's still only a game, so don't take it too seriously and just respect the horrors of war. Take care and bye for now.